Assassin's Creed has spent nearly 2 decades giving us some of the most theatrical, philosophical, and downright tragic villain deaths in all of gaming. We're not just talking about a hidden blade in the throat and a fade to black, we're talking about the memory corridor, that hazy, ethereal limbo where the Templars' final words punch harder than the blade that took them down. The whispered confessions, the ideological gut punches, the moments where the villain looks the assassin dead in the eye and says something that lingers in your head years after you put the controller down. Al-Mualim. We start where everything started, the Gardens of Masyaf, the year 1191, and the most foundational betrayal in the entire franchise. Al-Mualim is the man who taught Altair the creed, the mentor, the grandfather figure. And then, in the climax of Assassin's Creed 1, he uses the Apple of Eden to reveal his hand. He wasn't just an assassin who lost his way. He was working both sides the entire time. His philosophy isn't faith in chaos. It's faith in himself. I had hoped you would understand, he says, gazing into the apple. He believed humanity was too weak to handle freedom. The Templars wanted to control through fear and law. He wanted to control through revealed truth. Same destination, different scenery. Al-Mualim weaponizes the apple, conjuring illusions of every target Altair has already killed: Robert de Sablé, Tamir, Garnier de Naplouse, the whole roster, forcing Altair to fight ghosts. When the illusions finally fade and Al-Mualim drops his guard, Altair strikes with the hidden blade his mentor literally taught him to use. Brutal poetry. This death rewrites the Brotherhood's entire understanding of itself. Templar corruption isn't just an external threat. It can root itself at the top of your own organization. Altair becomes mentor, refuses to destroy the apple, and dedicates the rest of his unnaturally long life to studying the pieces of Eden. The codex he leaves behind seeds every assassin generation that follows for the next 3 centuries. Ezio reads it, Edward inherits fragments of it, and the Brotherhood's entire intellectual lineage traces back to a betrayed student studying his dead mentor's lies. Without this one death, there is no Brotherhood as we know it. Al-Mualim was wrong about the apple, but he was right about one thing. His death really did change everything. Rodrigo Borgia. 2 years later in our world, 15 years later in Ezio's, we get the franchise's most famous anticlimax. The Vatican Vault, 1499. Rodrigo Borgia, the Spaniard, now Pope Alexander VI, has the papal staff. Ezio has the apple. The two converge under the Sistine Chapel, and Rodrigo unleashes his philosophy in full. The pieces of Eden are gifts from the gods, and only he is worthy to receive them. Religion, to him, is just the tool. Power is the prayer. He sneers at Ezio's family, his creed, his entire crusade. Here's the twist. Ezio doesn't kill him, not in the moment we expect. After beating Rodrigo to a pulp in the vault, Ezio drops his blade. Killing you won't bring my family back. I'm done. He walks away. It's one of the most surprising endings in the franchise. Rodrigo's actual death comes years later, in Brotherhood's opening cinematic, poisoned by his own son Cesare, with an apple intended for Cesare's enemies, patricide by inheritance. Even his death scene gets stolen from him. Rodrigo's survival in Assassin's Creed 2 is what makes Brotherhood possible. Cesare's reign of terror over Rome only happens because Dad is still in the picture to be overthrown. His death by his son's hand sets up Cesare as a villain who will betray anyone, including blood, including the man who handed him every advantage he ever had, and it permanently warps the perception of the Borgia name across European history. 500 years later, the family is still synonymous with corruption, nepotism, and palace poisonings. The Templar Order in Italy never recovers its papal foothold the same way again, which is the real reason the order pivots toward banking and statecraft for the next 3 centuries. Rodrigo broke the church power model. Cesare buried it, Cesare Borgia. 8 years and several Borgia atrocities later, we get one of the most quoted scenes in the entire franchise. Viana, Spain, 1507. Cesare Borgia is cornered on the castle walls during a siege. He has spent his entire life believing he is exceptional, untouchable, written into destiny by the hand of God himself. When Ezio finally catches him, Cesare doesn't beg. He declares, with full Borgia confidence, "I will not die by the hand of a man." "No man can murder me. Fate decides. Fate alone." Ezio's response is, without exaggeration, one of the cleanest mic drops in gaming history. He grabs Cesare, hoists him over the parapet, and replies, "Then I leave you in the hands of fate." He drops him. Cesare falls to his death on the rocks below, ended not by a blade but by gravity, the most democratic killer of all. Fate, indeed. Cesare's death dismantles the most aggressive Templar campaign in Renaissance Europe. The Italian Brotherhood, now fully restored under Ezio's leadership, reclaims Rome from years of tyranny. Ezio's mentorship era begins in earnest, which leads directly into Revelations and the foundation of the modern Brotherhood. And philosophically, the scene defines the Creed's entire relationship with arrogance. The Templars believe in destiny, hierarchy, the divine right of the few. The Assassins believe history happens to all of us equally, and that no one is above the fall. Cesare learned that lesson at terminal velocity. Haytham Kenway. Now we hit one of the most emotionally devastating scenes in the entire saga. Two playable protagonists, one family, one fatal misunderstanding. Fort George, 1781. Connor Redanaketon has been raised to believe his father is a Templar villain. Haytham has been raised to believe order is freedom. They've worked together briefly, even respected each other, but when their philosophies finally collide, neither man will yield an inch. Haytham accuses Connor of fighting for a country that will betray its own ideals, and history would prove him uncomfortably correct. "You're going to suffer the same fate as those you sided against," he tells his son. It's not a threat, it's a prediction. Their final fight is a brutal hand-to-hand brawl across the powder magazines of Fort George. Haytham is no tutorial enemy. He's the man who taught half the Templar Order how to fight. When Connor finally pins him, Haytham doesn't go gentle. The memory corridor scene that follows is devastating. "Don't think I have any intention of caressing your cheek and saying I was wrong. I will not say I am sorry, my son. I will not." Connor stabs him with his own hidden blade. The colonial right of the Templars loses its Grand Master, but its ideology survives. Charles Lee inherits the order, and the United States is born with Templar fingerprints baked into its foundations. More personally, Connor's victory hollows him out. He's killed his father, fractured his identity, and won a revolution that immediately starts betraying his people. This death sets the tone for the rest of Assassin's Creed III's bleak, melancholic ending. Charles Lee. From the most explosive father-son confrontation to the quietest, most deliberately anticlimactic kill in the franchise. After the burning of Fort George and a year of pursuit, Connor finds Charles Lee not in some grand fortress or palace, but slumped over a table at the Conestoga Inn, exhausted, drunk, defeated. There's no speech about Templar grandeur, no sneering monologue about how Connor will never understand the bigger picture. Lee has nothing left to argue. The memory corridor whispers a soft, weary acceptance. "I'll grant you've earned this." He's been hunted for so long that the relief almost outweighs the dread. Connor sits down across from him. They share a drink in silence. Then Connor activates his hidden blade and stabs Charles Lee through the chest. No fight, no chase, no spectacle, just the cold mechanics of an obligation being completed. It is, deliberately, one of the most unsatisfying kills in any major game, and that's the entire point. There's no catharsis to be had here, there's just an ending. Lee's death formally ends the colonial right's most active campaign in the post-war United States. But Connor returns home to find his village abandoned, his people displaced by the very nation he helped create. The Templars lose a Grand Master. The Assassins win nothing meaningful. The death of Charles Lee is the franchise's bleakest thesis statement. Even when the Creed succeeds, sometimes nothing actually changes. The hidden blade slid in, the bottle was emptied, and the great wheel of history simply kept grinding forward without a pause. Crawford Starrick. From a silent tavern in the woods to a royal ball at Buckingham Palace, we jump forward to Victorian London and the most theatrically capitalist villain in the franchise. Buckingham Palace, 1868. Crawford Starrick has spent the entire game weaving himself into every artery of London's industrial economy, banks, factories, hospitals, prisons, newspapers. He's not just a Templar Grandmaster, he's a CEO of the future. At the royal ball, with the Shroud of Eden in his possession and the British elite at his fingertips, he delivers a sermon about the city he built. London, be proud of what we have built. It is mine. It is mine. He believes the Templars don't need to rule from the shadows anymore. They should rule from boardrooms. Jacob and Evie Fry, twins, partners, opposites, corner Starrick during the ball. The Shroud of Eden makes him nearly impossible to put down, healing every wound the moment it's inflicted. The fight becomes an endurance war. Chip damage faster than the Shroud can mend it. Eventually, the twins overwhelm him together, and the Shroud's power fails when its host's will finally breaks under sustained Fry twin pressure. London is freed from a Templar stranglehold on its industrial machinery, and the British Brotherhood is reborn for the modern age. The Shroud of Eden falls into assassin hands, briefly, but Starrick's vision didn't really die with him. The blueprint he drew for corporate Templar fusion becomes the template for Abstergo Industries a century later. Every modern-day Templar boardroom owes its existence to the architecture Starrick designed in a top hat and waistcoat. He lost the battle. His business model won the war. François Thomas Germain. Stepping briefly backward in release order but forward in dramatic stakes, we land in revolutionary Paris. The Temple, 1794. François Thomas Germain is no ordinary Templar Grandmaster. He is a sage, a reincarnation of the Isu Aita, and he believes the French Revolution is his masterpiece. In his confrontation with Arnaud Dorian, he reveals the Templars' true long game. Chaos is not the enemy of order, it's the forge. Revolutions burn down the old structures so the Templars can rebuild them stronger, leaner, more centralized. The Reign of Terror, his doing. The guillotines, tools. The Order's victory is now assured, he tells Arnaud. A new world has begun. Their final battle takes place deep beneath the temple in a chamber lit by Isu artifacts. Germain channels Piece of Eden energy, hurling blasts of light at Arnaud across the room and hall. The fight is more mystical than physical, a duel between two men touched by ancient powers. Arnaud eventually breaks through Germain's defenses and lands the killing blow with the hidden blade. In death, Germain sees Jacques de Molay, the original Templar martyr, burned in 1314, and he smiles. Germain's death doesn't undo the revolution, it confirms it. The modern Templar order, as we recognize it today, is essentially his architectural achievement. Industrialists, bankers, technocrats, all heirs to the post-revolutionary infrastructure he engineered. Arnaud wins the duel and loses the war. By the time we reach the present day of the franchise, the world Germain envisioned has more or less been built around us. Few villain deaths in any franchise come with that level of post-mortem victory baked in. Laureano de Torres y Ayala. Back to the Caribbean and the most pirate-flavored Templar takedown in the entire saga. Long Bay, Jamaica, 1722. Laureano de Torres y Ayala has spent the entire game chasing the Observatory, an Isu device that can spy on anyone on Earth through a single vial of their blood. He's the governor of Havana, the Grand Master of the West Indies Rite, and the most polished antagonist in Black Flag. His philosophy is clean and chilling. Piracy, freedom, lawlessness. These are diseases. The Templars don't want to crush people, they want to save them from themselves. Edward Kenway, a pirate turned reluctant assassin, embodies absolutely everything Torres wants to eradicate from the world. At the observatory itself, surrounded by Templar elites and ancient precursor technology, Torres finally faces Edward in a corridor lit by Isu light. The fight isn't long. Torres is no warrior, he's a strategist, but it's the symbolism that lands hard. Edward, the pirate who spent 4 games becoming an assassin, kills the man who represents the death of his way of life. The hidden blade goes in, and Torres dies surprised, genuinely surprised, that the universe allowed a man like Edward to defeat a man like him. The observatory is secured and hidden away from the Templar Order for centuries. Caribbean Templar operations collapse almost overnight, but Edward's victory comes laced with grief. He's lost crew, friends, his moral compass, and most of his romantic life. Torres's death is what finally pushes Edward to embrace the Brotherhood fully and return to England, where he raises a son who will one day become Grand Master of the very order Edward just decapitated. The entire Kenway curse begins here, in a stone chamber in Jamaica. Fulk. Now we move to the Valhalla entries, and the most religiously charged death on this list. Portcester, 9th century England. Fulk is a Christian fanatic working for the Order of the Ancients, the Proto-Templar organization. She has captured Sigurd Styrbjornsson, Ivor's brother and adoptive sibling, and has convinced herself she's saving his soul through systematic torture. Her ideology is the inverse of every other villain on this list. She doesn't believe in cold rationality or imperial order. She believes in fire, in faith, in burning the pagan out of the Norse one severed limb at a time. When Ivor breaks into her sanctuary, Fulk meets her not with fear but with something close to rapture. She believes she's doing God's work. The fight against Fulk is brutal and personal. Eivor finds Sigurd mutilated, missing his hand, his mind shattered, his identity as a god king fractured beyond repair, and the rage carries her through the encounter. The killing blow isn't a clean stealth strike. It's earned, slow, vengeful. Fulk's last breath is a whispered prayer. Eivor's response is the hidden blade. Fulk's death doesn't end the Order of the Ancients in England. It accelerates the war between them and the Hidden Ones across the entire Isle. More importantly, it permanently fractures Sigurd. He's lost his hand, his belief in his own godhood is shaken, and the relationship between him and Eivor will never fully heal. Fulk wins something in death that she couldn't win in life. She breaks the Raven clan's foundation from the inside out. Sometimes a villain's most devastating victory comes after the credits roll on their boss fight, Basim ibn Ishaq. Here's where things get weird, and mythological, and honestly kind of brilliant. The Yggdrasil chamber deep beneath modern Norway. Basim ibn Ishaq, the Hidden One mentor who trained Eivor, who taught her the Creed, who walked beside her through dozens of hours of gameplay, is revealed to be something far older and far angrier. He's an Isu, a reincarnation of Loki, and Eivor is the reincarnation of Odin himself. The grudge between them is older than civilization. Basim's son was killed by Odin's order in a previous incarnation. He has spent millennia preparing his revenge. "I will have my justice," he tells her in the chamber, voice thick with ancient grief. Here's the twist. Basim doesn't die. Eivor and Sigurd trap him inside the Yggdrasil simulation, the same Isu device that has stored countless consciousnesses across millennia. He's not killed. He's imprisoned. The franchise's most cathartic death isn't a death at all. It's a containment, a sealing away, a problem deferred rather than solved. And here's where it gets wild. In the modern day, Layla Hassan and Sean Hastings find the Yggdrasil chamber and accidentally release Basim's consciousness into the present. He emerges in the 21st century, fully aware, with Loki's intellect intact and 1,000 years of grievance still simmering at full heat. He becomes the protagonist of Assassin's Creed Mirage, retroactively, and a major modern-day antagonist going forward. Basim is the rare villain whose defeat actually unlocks his most dangerous chapter. The cliffhanger Valhalla ends on is essentially the franchise admitting it has no idea what to do with him, and that's terrifying in the best possible way. King Alfred the Great. Here's the one that completely subverts the entire formula. Wessex, 9th century. King Alfred is the man you've been hunting across Valhalla's entire Order of the Ancients arc. Letters with cryptic signatures, manipulations from the shadows, religious zealotry coordinating a hidden war against the Norse settlers. And then, in the final letter Ivor receives, the truth lands. Alfred isn't just the head of the Order of the Ancients in England. He's also the secret founder of the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ, the early Proto-Templar Order. His entire campaign has been a self-undermining masterstroke. He's been dismantling the corrupt, pagan-rooted Order of the Ancients from within so he can replace it with something he believes is purer, holier, more disciplined. Now, if you're thinking on how he's assassinated, he isn't. This is the twist. Eivor doesn't kill Alfred. The two of them meet in the closing moments of the arc, and Alfred essentially confesses everything. He's choosing to abdicate his identity, to fake his own death, to become a ghost, and let his ideological successors carry his work forward into the centuries to come. Eivor lets him walk. It's one of the franchise's most quietly subversive endings, and it lands because it refuses the easy catharsis. Alfred's death isn't a death, it's a regeneration. The Templar Order, as we know it across the entire franchise, is essentially his philosophical great-grandchild. Every Crusade-era Templar, every Borgia, every Starrick, every Vidic, every Germain on this list owes their ideological lineage to the seed Alfred planted in the 9th century. He is the villain who shaped the entire millennium-spanning conflict, and he did it by walking away from the table, the longest historical fallout of any entry on this list, by an absolutely enormous margin, Warren Vidic. And we close where the modern-day storyline closed, the original face of Abstergo, the man who started Desmond Miles's entire nightmare. The Abstergo facility, December 2012. Warren Vidic is the scientist who kidnapped Desmond, strapped him to the Animus, and used his ancestral memories as a treasure map for Templar artifacts across multiple games. He's a true believer, convinced that humanity is too broken, too violent, too irrational to govern itself, and that the Templars' centuries-long project to install global control is mercy, not tyranny. When Desmond confronts him in the facility, Vidic spits venom about Desmond's father, about the Brotherhood's failures, about the inevitability of Templar victory. He never breaks character. Not once. Desmond, wielding the Apple of Eden, doesn't even need to draw a blade for the bodyguards. He uses the apple to make the Templar soldiers turn their weapons on themselves and each other. Then he walks calmly to Vidic and ends him with the hidden blade. It's the most one-sided fight on this entire list, and it's deeply, profoundly satisfying after 3 games of being Vidic's personal lab rat. And then, hours later, in-game, Desmond himself dies. He uses the eye to repel a solar flare and save the world, sacrificing his consciousness in the process. So Vidic's death is the final meaningful Brotherhood victory of the entire Desmond era, and the franchise immediately loses its modern-day protagonist as a direct consequence of the events Vidic set in motion. Abstergo regroups, restructures, and eventually launches the Helix Project, the corporate version of the Animus that drives every modern-day storyline since. Vidic dies, his machine wins, the Templars learn the lesson their forerunners couldn't. Lose the man, keep the system, and you've actually won. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.